found my throat drying up at the prospect. If you don't mind, I'd just like to remind us of where we started on Friday night. And also because it's Sunday morning, of course, the day of the risen Lord. And just to remind ourselves of his presence among us and with us. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." And they replied, "We'll come with you." They went out and got into the boat, but caught nothing that night. When it was already light, there stood Jesus on the shore, though the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. Jesus called out to them, "Have you caught anything, friends?" And when they answered no, he said, "Throw the net out to starboard, and you'll find something." So they threw the net out, and could not haul it in because of the quantity of fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." At these words, "It is the Lord," Simon Peter tied his outer garment round him, for he had nothing on, and jumped into the water. The other disciples came on in the boat, towing the net with the fish. Well, I want to thank you, first of all, for being able to experience something of that gospel these days. It is the Lord whom we've recognised in one another and recognised in our home situations and recognised also in those to whom we're called to bring him. I don't know about you, but it's almost like everything is given at the beginning, and that's the truth of the faith, isn't it? You know, the generosity of the Lord from the first moment of his resurrection. That God gives us everything we need from the first moment that we encounter the Lord. You will know that my family come from the west of Ireland. It's a scenery and a kind of culture and climate which is very similar to this one. It's been lovely waking up these mornings and looking out over the sea, because that's the kind of climate that I kind of used to when I used to go to the place where my mum and dad are from. There's a famous story there of one of the local priests. It had been a very harsh winter Sunday and it snowed heavily overnight. And he was making the trek from the presbytery to the church. It was about 100 yards. And he kind of got dressed up very heavily, heavy coat and scarf and so on, and made this walk. And not to scandalise you, but it was so early in the morning, and it was so cold, he kind of had this thought to himself, I wonder if anybody's come to Mass this morning. And the second thought, slightly, I hope not, so I can go back to bed. Anyway, he got into the sacristy, took his coat off, got ready for Mass, went out onto the altar, kissed the altar, looked down, and there was one man in the church. And in good Catholic tradition, he was sitting on the back row. So he started to celebrate Mass. And it got to that point after the Gospel when the priest gives the homily. And he shouted down, "Sir, would you like a homily this morning, a sermon?" And this voice came back, "Father, I'm a very simple man. And I live at the back of the mountain, and I have a flock of hens, and each morning I go out and I'll feed this flock of hens. If there's only one there, then I'll still feed it with my bucket of meal." And the priest thought, "Don't take them." So he began to preach. And his originally planned 5 minutes turned to 10, and his 10 turned to 15, and 15 to 20, and he stopped after 25 minutes. Now, I'm sure you've never sat through homilies like that, when you never know when they're going to finish. Anyway, he stopped after 25 minutes, and he shouted down, "Sir, was that okay?" And this response came back, Father, I'm a very simple man. And I live at the back of the mountain. I have a flock of hens and I go out each morning to feed them with this bucket of meal. And if there's only one there, then I'll still feed it, but I won't give it the whole bucket. You may feel on this Sunday morning that you've had the whole bucket. And that's certainly something of the experience. But that's what God is like, you see. God doesn't hold back. He gives you everything you need. He gives the totality of himself. And our human condition finds it hard to take on. So something of the beauty of these days is the reality of that experience. And that is true from the origins of Christianity. The whole purpose of Jesus Christ is that he is God among us, the Word made flesh, God himself in his totality. And therefore, it has always been, and therefore at this moment in the diocese's life, it is the Lord who is the heart of what we are about. So, if you like, a very simple mission statement for us at this moment. This is not the kind of mission statement you can just do on one sheet of paper, and it will be made available. I've asked David this morning if we could make this available over these next days. So, even if you do feel a bit tired and want to rest, it will be available. I title it simply, It is the Lord. It is the Lord who is the way, the truth and the life. It is Jesus Christ who is the Son of God, who came to dwell among us, at once fully human and fully divine, who was crucified, died, and rose from the dead for the salvation of the whole world. It is Jesus who promised his disciples that he would be with them always. He gives us the Holy Spirit that we can know and love him, and through the communion of the Catholic Church, we can have the fullness of life. It is Jesus who is at the side of each one of us to give us daily strength, to enlighten, and to give us his freedom. It is the Lord who invites us to see him and serve him in the least in our society. It is the Lord who calls us to renew the personal encounter with him in the church, to deepen our love for the truth of our faith, and to joyfully share him with others. It is the Lord whom we desire to share with others, mindful of those who, for whatever reason, do not know the joy of a daily encounter with him. We walk with them. We accompany those who have stopped the practice of their Catholic faith, because we want to assist them in coming to see again the beauty and joy of following Jesus. We recognize that every person is made in the image and likeness of God and called to life in him. In those who do not believe, we recognize that in their openness to truth, to beauty, and to goodness, they contain already the seeds of the Word who became flesh in Jesus Christ. And it is him in every brother and sister whom we seek to serve. We desire to put ourselves at the service of every person, that they can hopefully, step by step, be led by the Holy Spirit in the mystery of God's love to experience the joy of knowing Jesus and of being in relationship with him. Each of us is called to be more fully converted to Jesus Christ, to see more deeply that it is the Lord who helps us live with our weakness, and overcome our sinfulness. We are encouraged to be bold in our confidence in him, to be fully connected to the church, infused with a sense of urgency, and filled with a deep joy that it is the Lord who wants us to be his missionary disciples. Now there is, alongside that, some other things which actually David summarised very well coming from the groups, which in Providence we've also heard from Father Stephen, and which I shared with some of the priests on Friday, and they'll be in the text that you'll have, but I don't want to repeat them this morning because I'm conscious that also we want to kind of keep our focus and our energies. So how do we concretise some of this? What does it mean for us in the diocese? How do we open ourselves to this invitation? Well, at diocesan level, we are already in the process of restructuring the vicariate, what was the vicariate for formation, into, and you've already perhaps seen this, a vicariate for evangelisation, catechesis, and schools. So a very definite focus on the fact that it is the Lord whom we in the diocese seek to offer anew. And I want here to thank, really, those who are in that vicariate, Father Gerard, David, Wells, John Mannix, for their participation in this review, and for also helping us to kind of move forward. The focus of this new vicariate are three pillars: parishes, youth, and schools. Because those are the hearts of where people experience the life of faith. So there will be a particular person designated to work specifically in our schools, with our schools, as a diocesan initiative for evangelisation with schools. There will be somebody, maybe one or two, maybe even three, working with parishes from a diocesan end to support, encourage, animate, resource parish groups in their evangelisation efforts. And there'll be a person working specifically with our youth in those areas. The focus for the diocesan team in evangelisation will be the local situation. Local parishes, local schools, local communities. And what I think is important, and this came up again and again, and we've experienced it here this weekend, vital in this will be a parish team, a parish evangelisation team. Or, if you prefer, in a phrase that's been very resonant, a group of friends who are committed and passionate and who have the desire in the local parish for this work. That parish evangelisation team is really, really important. It's worth reminding ourselves of what Pope Francis teaches us in Evangelii Gaudium about the importance of the parish. He quotes, "The parish is not an outdated institution. Precisely because it possesses great flexibility, it can assume quite different contours depending on the openness and missionary creativity of the pastor and the community. While certainly not the only institution which evangelises, if the parish proves capable of self-renewal, it continues to be the church living in the midst of her sons and daughters." And then a bit of a warning from Pope Francis. "This presumes that it, the parish, is really in contact with the homes and lives of its people, and does not become a useless structure out of touch with people, or a self-absorbed group made up of a chosen few." Salutary, isn't it? And then again, positively, "The parish is the presence of the church in a given territory, an environment for hearing God's word, for growth in the Christian life, for dialogue, proclamation, charitable outreach, worship, and celebration. And then a key sentence, I think, for us. In all its activities, not just some, in all its activities, the parish encourages and trains its members to be evangelizers. Repeat that sentence. In all its activities, the parish encourages and trains all its members to be evangelizers. It's a community of communities, a sanctuary where the thirsty come to drink in the midst of their journey, and a centre of constant missionary outreach. So not once, not try one thing, fails, and we say, oh, that didn't work. Constant. And then another warning. We must admit, though, that the call to review and renew our parishes has not yet sufficed to bring them nearer to people, to make them environments of living communion and participation, and to make them completely mission-oriented. I think a sobering question for us, somebody mentioned this to me a few weeks ago, and I thought it was very salutary, a sobering question. Would it make a difference if your church wasn't there? In your area, in your part of the diocese, in your parish? And this brings us then to focus on those communities that you've already mentioned, those kind of three groups that evangelisation seeks to touch. And we should, in all that we do, have an eye to reflecting on how is it reaching any one of these groups. Church-going Catholics, we've already heard that, haven't we, this weekend? 2/3 of us are doubtful whether we believe in God. So, reaching that community. Secondly, we've called them traditionally the lapsed, non-church-going Catholics, those who have little connection with the parish. What are we doing that's helping them make this journey? And thirdly, those who do not have any idea of God, do not believe in Him, don't have any contact with faith. And traditionally in the church, over the last 30 years, I think we have tried to do something with those first two groups. We've tried different things, maybe not in concerted ways, but we have tried. We've done almost nothing with the third group, it seems to me. There are some very good national initiatives. So we don't just work in isolation here in the diocese. I was appointed in November to be chair of the Department of Evangelisation and Catechesis for all of the bishops in England and Wales. And you know what it's like. I'd made the promise when I came to the diocese that I'd spend the first 2 years focusing very much on life in the diocese and giving myself to that. And then you get this request to come into something at a national level. And I only agreed to take on that responsibility because I could see that it dovetailed beautifully with what we, I think, need to try and do here in the local church. So I think there are resources and initiatives and momentum and insights that are available and there at national level which can help us and that we can connect into. And I just mentioned 2 projects especially. The first was a piece of research which was conducted with those Catholics who've kind of given up the practice of the faith. And this was done through through the schools. So the researcher interviewed parents of children who were sending their children to Catholic schools, many of whom had little or no contact with their local parish church. There were some fascinating things that came out of that. And the piece of research is one which I've shared with the Vicariate already as an important insight. The interesting thing is that these Catholics didn't say they they weren't Catholics. They actually believe they are Catholics, even though they only go to church once or twice a year. For them, the locus of their faith is very often through their children. And what they talk about and what they reflect on is the importance that the school has been for them in the celebrations of the Mass, in their experiences of faith, and how they were looking for different opportunities to begin to engage, how they felt totally unresourced in terms of the understandings of their faith, how they often discovered that the church set things up such that their family found it difficult to engage and participate. And it's one of the challenges for us, I think, isn't it? You know, even on lovely experiences like this, and some of the parents were saying this earlier, we must begin to do things in church, or as church, which makes it more possible for families to be present. And that has implications for the timings we do things, how we look after children so that adults, married couples, parents can participate. Finances, because it's expensive to come on a weekend for a whole family. So how do we begin to do things in a way that whole families could be present? There's a question. But the key thing about the school is it is a threshold point, which is encountering a lot of people who don't have a direct contact with the parish church. So how can we enter into that threshold point in a way that's going to invite those people into something deeper and more lasting, and which is full of the beauty and the joy and the richness that we experience, that we've experienced this weekend in our faith. So I want some of our initiatives to look at how we can encourage and challenge parents to go deeper. I know that on the surface, some parents will say, I'm not interested. I'm interested in my child just getting a good education, and that's why they go to the school. But I think there are opportunities there. There's real potential on how those who've stopped the practice of their Catholic faith could start a deeper journey. And those who are not Catholic, because let's face it, we have a lot of non-Catholics in our schools too. And some of those are really open to this invitation. Some of those who've got no faith, one or two of them are among you. You experienced the life of the Catholic Church, the beauty of faith, through the experience of sending your child to a Catholic school, and that awoke something within you, and you took a journey which led to a deeper encounter with Jesus Christ. That is something which I think we can offer more broadly. Within this, we must recognise the need for more committed Catholics in teaching in our schools. We have some really wonderful heads and teachers, and some of you are among us, and I thank you for being here. So I want to also, for us to look at how we might support initiatives which grow Catholic teachers. I like the image, and I used this with the heads when I was with them last October, the image of a kind of ecosystem, you know, with a precious plant. You know, to grow a lily in the winter, you need a greenhouse. If you put it out into the kind of Siberian winter, it will destruct and disintegrate and die. So what is the ecosystem that's going to help grow and develop Catholic teachers in our diocese? Because what often happens is that some of our committed young people go to university, go to train as teachers in other parts of the country, and they never come back. So what will help them to stay locally, participate in the life of our Catholic schools, develop their training there, have a sense of the mission to the church in this place? Our schools are hugely diverse. The crucial part of their identity is that they're Catholic by virtue of their provision. That's our vision. And I recognise that many people are already doing excellent work in our schools. that there is a need to have initiatives and structures in place to foster growth and confidence in our Catholic identity and practice. And in this way, we can support committed Catholic teachers to give focus and energy to the Catholic mission of the school. So part of our evangelisation initiatives must be to try and look at pathways which help us train and form some Catholic teachers. And in this respect, I'm delighted that we've got CAST, our multi-academy trust, because it provides an opportunity and a vehicle to do something very creative together as a diocese. The second initiative, happening at national level, is called Proclaim 15. This is a gathering in July in Birmingham, which will have a focus on encouraging and resourcing evangelisation efforts and working with diocesan and local teams. So I'm asking 35 from the diocese to be present. As I say, the focus will be to look around at what is good nationally and indeed internationally, what helps and what can be brought back to the local situation, to the local parish, to the local community, to the local school. For those of you who are interested, there are already some excellent resources on the Bishops' Conference website under Proclaim 15, which you can easily print off. So those of you who are already engaging in this work might like to do that. The emphasis, I repeat, is on local projects. You will know, I'm sure, the story of the 4 Polish tailors. Do you know that one? There were 4 Polish tailors in one street in Poland. And one of the tailors came along, he saw the first shop window, and his colleague had put a notice in the shop window saying, "This is the best tailor in the city." Went along to the second one, and he saw another notice, and it said, "This is the best tailor in the whole of Poland." Then he went along to the third one, and he saw another note saying, "This is the best tailor in the whole wide world." And then he came back to his own shop and he put a notice in the window saying, "This is the best tailor in the street." So where the Lord is recognised happens locally, in your community, in your small group, in your small parish, in your little initiative, whatever it might be. I just, again, want to summarise some initiatives, and this is not exhaustive, and you've already heard others, but just to give you a flavour of some of those that I've experienced in the last year, and again, to try and be very concrete, to give you a flavour of this. We've already mentioned night fever. The idea of going out onto the street, inviting people to come into a church to light a candle. It works very well in situations where there is a lot of footfall passing the church. And when you think about that, I think creatively, we're not a city centre church, therefore we can't do that. It's not a place that this could happen. Think, are there any opportunities in the year when you do have footfall with people passing? Or think about it in another way, as a few churches have already done in the diocese. So this was adapted in a rural setting in the parish of Marnell in Dorset to be an open church afternoon to invite local villagers who lived in the village all their life to come into the parish church at some point during the day, during the afternoon. So the people went out into the village onto the streets during market day, and they said, "Would you like to come into the Catholic Church for a visit?" The most common response wasn't, "I'm not interested in doing that," or "I'd really love to do that." The most common response was, "Are we allowed in?" does that teach us? Or another adaptation of this going out to invite people in Kingsbridge, on a Saturday before Christmas, they had an open church and invited people to come and see a variety of cribs. So people in the parish, different groups, came and established cribs dotted around the church. The doors of the church were open on a Saturday afternoon, and people were just invited to come and spend some time looking around the different cribs. Over 300 people on one Saturday afternoon. Adult renewal and formation, or being a school of discipleship. We've already heard, when you invite people in, what do you bring them into? That question. And there are some really wonderful resources available for parishes and groups to use, which can assist people in their coming together and in that initial formation or discipleship. You know, like Father Stephen said, it's not spiritual prostitution. You don't just give them a lovely experience one-off. You help them take, for those who want, a journey. You walk with them. And the resources that are available for that, just some of them, again, not exhaustive. Cafe, Catholic Alpha, the Called and Gifted initiative, the work of Robert Barron through his Catholicism series and his new Evangelisation series. A series of resources on the web under the title An Amazing Parish. Just Google it and you'll see. Whole set of resources there available for parishes to download, which will help you look at some of the traits that can help you as an evangelisation team, as a group of friends passionate about this work, and what you might begin to put in place that will help your parish develop some initiatives. Or indeed, the initiative that Father Stephen started, which is becoming a process now, a programme called Sycamore, which he's developed working with university students at the University of London. All of these aim at assisting with that personal journey of conversion. And let's face it, we go on it with them. Yeah. It's not that we just do it for them, we go on it with them. We participate in that journey. So there are lots of different resources available already there. And part of the work of the diocesan team will be to work with your local group to see what you might try and what you might like to look at. Teams. Already in some parishes, there are emerging some evangelisation teams. So this is already beginning in some parishes in the diocese. And that's wonderful to see. So some teams are looking at the local college of higher education and going into that place to engage with students, have a conversation about faith. Some are using the local markets and having a presence there. Some are using initiatives like Come Home for Christmas. It's a particular thing, you know, like often happens, doesn't it? The youngsters come back to mum and dad for Christmas holidays, or at Christmas time people decide they want to go to church, or at Easter, or whatever. And out of that, there is an engagement and opportunities for them to take a step a little bit further. Or bring a friend to church Sunday. Now you would think every Sunday was bring a friend to church Sunday. But sometimes it helps to focus and invite people in the congregation, help them prepare for that and begin to do it. That's also been good. The new movements. Again, there is a freshness in the new ecclesial communities and new movements. And they bring, again, a freshness to this, what we might do. And I think we need to be open in the diocese to the place of the newer ecclesial movements and what they bring. Invite one or two of them to come to the diocese and help us in terms of our evangelisation efforts. Already, I think we're very fortunate that we have the Chemin Neuf community who've come to Schloeder Abbey. They are offering individually guided retreats, Ignatian retreats for individuals. They're beginning to do a thing called Cana Weekends, one of them coming up, I think, in July, which is an opportunity for whole families to come and have a kind of retreat experience together. Celebrate, that's already been mentioned. But I mentioned it again. I've seen and I've been deeply impressed by the accompaniment that takes place, by the practical assistance given to families, by the day-to-day work done with married couples, and the peer ministry to young people. And some of that came through in the way that the McCarthy family shared with us. And I'm not saying everybody has to go on Celebrate, but what is there in what Celebrate does that we need to take on in what we do that might help people? And one of those things, of course, is that sense of joy and enthusiasm in the faith. It's been mentioned again and again, but vital. Prayer. Again, I've seen the impetus for a more focused contemplative prayer at the community at Lanherne, down in Cornwall, with the Franciscan sisters that are there. It's a community of 10 relatively young sisters. And also we're very fortunate in the diocese to have the Poor Clares at Linton, and it was lovely to visit with them too in the last few months. We need these pools of deep prayer in the life of the church. You've already mentioned this and referred to it in terms of our own life and in anything that we do. Some people in the parish, especially the elderly or housebound, will make an invaluable contribution to our efforts through prayer and intercession. And every initiative that we take on should be accompanied by a team of prayers. And that sustained pattern of going out in intercession and return back to the Lord in thanksgiving, that's part of the spiritual life, part of the life of faith that's important for us. Another kind of initiative that's about and out there which can help us. The School of the Annunciation at Buckfast Abbey. There are a great series of courses available, particularly helpful for us here in the southwest. And I suppose I particularly encourage those who are wanting to take the intellectual journey a bit deeper, a bit more seriously. Look at what's available there. I draw your attention to two initiatives. The first is the foundation course for catechists, which begins at the end of February. And the other is a diploma, again, distance learning. Both the beauty of the courses that they offer at the School of the Annunciation is that they're distance learning. So it works very well in a huge diocese like ours. So the other initiative is on media and the new evangelization. So there may be one of you or some of you who are interested in exploring that. They're doing incredibly creative work. If you look on the website of the Pontifical Council for Social Communications, so the Holy See, the Vatican's office, which is engaged with communications worldwide, social communications, this course on media and the new evangelization is on their opening webpage. So it gives you a sense of how valuable and creative and imaginative that is. It's particularly good, I think, at looking at the crossover between culture and faith. How do we use what's in the culture to challenge the fact that people don't believe in God? In this, I think beauty has a vital place. It's another element that I've witnessed in the last year, most especially. In the tradition, it's given a fancy title, the Via Pulchritudinis, the way of beauty. That it is the experience of beauty which converts. Yeah? We often concentrate on the truth or on the good. And there's often conflict when we do that. You get into an argument with somebody about why you believe what you believe. Or they feel that we're telling them off because of their lives, that they're not doing something right, particularly right, and doing it in a wrong way. So they feel judged and rejected. The experience of beauty is not like that. The experience of beauty is always an experience of God too. So the church's liturgy, Eucharistic adoration, a beautiful church, sacred music, whether that's of a traditional kind or of a more celebratory kind, the beauty of praying together, all of those experiences of beauty help people encounter God. And they can be an opening for this initial proclamation. So do not doubt how important your church building is, your liturgy, what music you have, how you help people enter into an experience which, as again and again we heard this, when people either came back to the faith or when they were first stimulated, it was an experience of the beauty of holiness in some sense, the beauty of God. Processions and pilgrimages. Again, these provide such rich opportunities. In them, we receive the faithful piety of God's people, what they hold on to as crucial in their life of faith. And I think within that, over this next year, in 2016, in the summer of 2016, we have the wonderful opportunity of World Youth Day in Krakow in Europe. So again, it's a wonderful opportunity for some of our young people in the diocese. And I've seen, and many of you will know this too, how that experience can be literally life-changing in someone's life. Ecumenism. Again, I've listened very carefully over this last year to the experience and practical approach of the evangelical churches, especially. For me, I have to say, it's one of the more exciting and interesting dimensions of ecumenism. We heard, didn't we, in those statistics, how the evangelical churches in particular are doing something extraordinary here in terms of people being able to own their faith in God and their belief in God. Now, I'm not telling everybody to go off and be an evangelical, but what is there that they are doing that we need to learn from? I had a very interesting conversation with one of the pastors and one of the facilitators in an ecumenical gathering. And she was particularly interested, because I said to her, this is what I want. I want to learn from you your skills and your insight into what it means to, they use the phrase, grow a church and seed a church. And that scattering of the seed is an image that we've used, isn't it? So that's what I'm interested in exploring with you. And then she said, well, what I'm interested in exploring with you is your depth. Because you as Catholics know what it is to accompany people in the depths. That was interesting for me. Anyway, just some initiatives which I've come across which the evangelical churches are doing. You take the traditional parish mothers and toddlers group, mothers and toddlers group meeting one weekday morning, and you give the mothers a pampering day at a local spa. Having the space to relax and to reflect together led 3 mothers to join their local cafe initiative in a parish church. Another example. A loving the neighbourhood afternoon, where members of a church community spent time on the street giving out cups of tea and coffee, painting the local railings of an estate, beautified the grounds surrounding the church, cleared the rubbish on the streets, and put some plants out in the local streets. One mother, who could never get her teenage children to tidy their own rooms, spoke of how engaged her teenagers were in this concrete, practical outreach, and how at the end of the Saturday they came to her and said, "Can we do it again next week?" And two of my favourites, which I have to say sound a bit strange and a bit gimmicky, but you see something of the imagination. A clothes swapping evening in a local pub for women. Don't let your imaginations get carried away. Women were asked to bring a bag of clothes they no longer used. So 50 of them met this one evening in a pub. Now, the great thing is they went home with a new outfit and with some new friends. And even more interesting, 5 of them decided to join the local Alpha in their parish church. And the other kind of gimmicky, imaginative initiative, who let the dads out? Fathers take their children to the local parish centre on a Saturday morning. The children have a set of events that occupy them. Dads get a cooked breakfast and are able to read the Saturday sports pages in peace. And mums get a morning to themselves. From these simple human contexts, local communities can see the church reaching out to them, wanting to be where they are. And there were some very particular and definitive responses. Okay, there were 50 women at the pub, and it was only 3 of them that went to the Alpha, but it's an extraordinary initiative. So cast the net wide, take a risk, and who knows what you might catch. Who knows where the net may fall and who may be attracted. As we've heard again and again this weekend, it is not ours to make a judgment. It is simply ours to be generous in throwing the net, in casting the seed. Vocations. I have to say it's been a joy to ordain one new priest last summer, and I look forward to the 2 priestly ordinations that we have this summer. I know some of you are here from Poole, so you know Father Rafe, who's new in the parish there, and of course this summer Jacek and Colin to be ordained priests for our diocese. We have 3 other men in formation for the priesthood, and 3 others apart from those who are discerning in discernment for their vocation to the priesthood. I think we must continue to accompany the young, and indeed the not so young, and present to them the possibility of a life lived in a particular way in the church. So yes, of course, marriage. Yes, of course, some of us are called to the single life. But I think especially the particularity of a call to the priesthood and the religious life. The Lord is still calling, it's whether we are still hearing. So again, I think part of our initiative must be to recognise the particular gift that religious life and the priesthood bring to our church community. There are so many other initiatives that we could share, and again, I ask you to be creative and to take risks. Whilst we can pick and choose the initiative or the programme or what we might try, depending on the circumstances of our parish, our school, our local community, what we cannot do is say that there is an option about the focus on evangelization. Pope Francis has made that clear. We've heard it in ourselves and in our own stories this weekend. But of course, it is the invitation of the Lord himself. Cast out your nets for a catch. So just finally, in these last few minutes, I just want to summarize some of the elements which I think are vital as together we make this journey. For us to remember that it is the Lord who is at the centre of what we're doing. And therefore, prayer is the beginning, middle and end of everything we do. We cannot give what we have not first received. And so our encounter with Jesus is something which is vital. Not only once in a lifetime, but in a daily experience. So some concrete expressions to that prayer for the diocese. I'm asking for a period of prayer in the diocese throughout Lent and Eastertide. We've prepared, and they were given to the priests on Friday, some very simple holy hours for adoration, Eucharistic adoration, which you can take on in your parish. I invite you and the diocese, if you do not already do this, to pray the sorrowful mysteries of the Rosary during Lent, and to pray the glorious mysteries in Eastertide. That novena of prayer, which was the prayer of the Church at her origin, with Mary and the apostles invoking the Lord for the gift of the Holy Spirit, which led to his gift at Pentecost. Some vigils, some prayer vigils. Internationally, the Pontifical Council for the New Evangelisation in Rome has set aside a date in March. So the parish, and provide some, and we'll be sending some resources for that. If you want to have a prayer vigil in your parish in March, especially. And Proclaim 15 spoke about that date in July, the 11th of July, when nationally there'll be a gathering of people being invited into this work and trying to help us bring back resources to our diocese. Every parish is invited on the 11th of July, or around, maybe from the 10th into the 11th, to have a time of a prayer, a vigil of prayer for that weekend. So there we see the participation of the local communities in the work that we're doing nationally. And that's the dynamic that we try to keep in mind even in our local project. You know, that lovely image that Father Stephen gave of the team, that young student and her team praying whilst the others were doing the concrete one-to-one work or working in a group with this evangelization initiative. I invited the relics of Blessed Louis and Zélie Martin to come to the diocese shortly after I arrived here. You will know that these are the parents of Saint Therese. They are the first beatified parents of a saint, and the first couple in the history of the Church to be proposed for canonization, to become saints together. I believe that they can be an inspiration to the families of today. So just a little bit about why I think that's so. They each possessed a small business and worked hard to keep their family life together. The things that preoccupied them are the things which preoccupy many families. Getting good childcare, achieving professional excellence, operating a profitable business, caring for aging parents, educating a special needs child, forming their children in the faith, finding the time to pray and to be active in their parish. All of those were contours of their family life. And they faced immense struggles. In 1877, Zélie, the mother, died of breast cancer, leaving Louis a single parent with 5 minor daughters. And later in his life, Louis was diagnosed with a form of dementia and spent 3 years in a psychiatric hospital. So like us, Louis and Zélie could not control the circumstances, couldn't always control the circumstances of their life. Life came at them unexpectedly, as it comes at us. And they couldn't prevent the tragedies of their life. The Franco-Prussian War, when they had to house 9 German soldiers, the infant deaths of 4 of their 9 children, 1 from abuse by a wet nurse, the painful diseases of their adult life, and Zélie's premature death. Nor could they escape the responsibilities that were given to them as business owners, caregivers, spouses, and parents. Their genius lay in how they accepted what happened to them, even in their own powerlessness, and saw it as part of the action of God in their lives. And they taught this radical openness to their daughter, Saint Therese, who is now a doctor of the Church. I think it's important to remember that Zélie and Louis Martin were declared blessed not because of Therese. She became a saint because of them. They created an environment in which holiness could be lived in the ordinary, complex, messy situation of family life. So I think it's a great grace for us that in May, coming to the diocese, they'll be at the cathedral in Plymouth between the 15th and 18th of May, and then at Dorchester between the 18th and 20th of May. Some final words then, the sacraments. Do not believe that the sacraments cannot be opportunities for this outreach. I've already mentioned adoration, Eucharistic adoration, but I also want to encourage a rediscovery for ourselves, first of all, of the place of penance, of confession. And there's a particular initiative I'd like us to think about. I shared it with the priests on Friday, called The Light is On For You, which is a diocesan-wide opportunity for people to go to confession. What you do is that the parish churches are open one evening a week between the hours of, say, 7 and 10. The same evening, the same hours, in the parish church, in every parish. So the priest is sitting in the church, the light is on. The light is on for you. And there's that invitation to come, to receive the Lord's mercy. And let's face it, if you don't want to go to your parish church, you know you can drive 2 parishes along and go to somebody over there. Just a little vignette about this. A very good friend of mine who's now a priest, and he tells this story quite openly about himself. So I'm not breaking the seal. As you know, what we call the seal of confession is for the priest to keep. The penitent, us who've gone to confession, can go out and talk about it if we want to, but I don't advise that normally. But anyway, he had this particular experience which he shared publicly, and so I asked the commission to share it with you. He was a young student at university in London, and it was coming up to Easter. It was Holy Week, it was Good Friday, and he went to confession in a church nearby, near to the university. And he told his story, and there was silence from the other end of the grill. And then this voice came back, "Do you believe in hell?" And then the priest began to kind of lambast him, really. He didn't tell him off. And he was a man of independent mind, who, although he hadn't been a great Catholic in his teenage years, an inner part of him knew that this wasn't right. So he began to get up to go out of the confessional. And there's a few priests here, they all know that this is one of your most panicky moments if somebody thinks you're that harsh that you're... Anyway, so the priest said to him, "Well, what about absolution?" And he said, "Father, I'm too angry. I'm not going to stay for absolution." So he walked out. He got out onto the high street, and he felt bad about it. He felt bad about it. He felt bad. He felt awful that he was angry. And he still wanted to go to confession. And he remembered from his youth that in another part of London, the parish where he used to go to Mass, that the priests always seemed to smile at you when you left church. He remembered that. He thought they were kind. So he got in a taxi and he went right across London. And sure enough, because it was Good Friday, and this parish was run by religious, there were confessions going on. So he went to confession, told exactly the same narrative. And again, there was silence on the other end. He thought, this can't happen twice. And then this voice came back saying, "You know, those were the loveliest sins I've heard all day." And he thought to himself, I've come from one nutter to another. But do you know, the second one got it more right than the first. Because as Pope Francis again, and he did this, didn't he? On the day after his inauguration, he went to St. Mary Major's church, and as he was leaving, he bumped into the confessors, and he said, "Be merciful." And he says, doesn't he, again and again, the confessional is not a torture chamber, it is a throne of mercy. And I, in my life, again and again and again, have been so grateful for this experience of mercy. And we need it. We need to know that we are forgiven, that we can be forgiven, and that the Lord desires to forgive us. So let us not give up on this great gift of mercy, which is the gift of confession. And let us offer it freely, generously to the diocese. Open doors. This has come up again and again, hasn't it? I believe our church buildings have a particular role. We need to take the risk to leave them open. Sorry, Anthony. Anthony's around, isn't he? Worried about the insurance and the finance and all that. The Lord will look after it, or will give us the resources to cope with it if something awful happens. Let us take the risk to leave the churches open and to let the people know that the church is open for them. Because people need this experience of peace, which only the Lord can give. And we need to befriend his gift of peace that we receive most especially in front of the Blessed Sacrament. To build the inner person, because the only way we're going to be able to be courageous and have the strength and the madness to go out is if we have the sense that he is with us, that he's always been with us, and that he will continue to be with us. Sorry, I'm going over, do you mind? Just the last points. The need to be courageous. We live in a time in Europe, in many ways, which has become tired of its Christian roots. We are so fortunate in our diocese to have a particular example of somebody who gave witness as one of the greatest evangelizers in the church's history, St. Boniface. I think it's wonderful he's our diocesan patron, and I think he rightly should be the patron of our evangelization efforts. Boniface encountered a culture which was against everything he believed. And yet, he saw that what he brought was to humanize that culture. And he did so in very practical ways. Rather, it sounds a bit esoteric, but he produced a thing called the Ars Grammatica, which was a little book which explained the Latin language, its syntax and its vocabulary, to the Germanic peoples. Now, please don't get bored and fall asleep. But the purpose of this was in order to introduce the humanizing experience of the gospel. And he knew that in giving Jesus, he was giving the peoples an experience of what it meant to be a fully alive human being. So what is the Ars Grammatica that we would use? And I think it must be, at some level, an engagement with the world of information technology and the internet. That's the world, especially that many of our young people inhabit. When I was first named Bishop of Plymouth, I went to see my brother, and I was given permission to tell the family a few days before the public announcement. And I spoke to my brother and sister-in-law, and told them. And then I said, what do you want to do about the young ones? When do you want to tell them? And my sister-in-law said, well, when does it become public? And I said, well, in 2 days' time on Saturday at 11. And she said, well, in that case, we can only tell Francesca at 10 o'clock. That's my niece, who's 22. She said, because the first thing she will do is go on her iPhone and tell all her friends. And this is the phrase she used. Because she does not have an experience which is not a shared experience. So that's the world that we have got to try and evangelize. And that requires of us an engagement in more imaginative, new ways. And I'm delighted that we're just in the process at this moment going through, and I ask you to pray for this, the appointment of the Diocesan Communications Officer. And this is no reflection and no judgment about anyone, but I'm deeply embarrassed about our website. Yeah? And the desire to move on, and the desire to have a presence and be engaged in that way. Because, especially to engage with our young people, because we need to use the vehicle, the Ars Grammatica, the internet, in order to help them come closer to the Lord, because he will help them be better human beings. Finally, we believe that the wonderful gift of the Catholic Communion is given over time, and in many different and varied ways. So there are wonderfully rich resources in the tradition, particularly in the lives of the saints. You know, the wonderful tradition that's ours in Gregory, Leo, Ambrose, all the way down to the modern era. And the wonderful witness we've received in this, in the lives of the last popes, Paul VI, Blessed Paul VI, speaking about Christ at the centre, there in John Paul II, there in Benedict, and now in dear Francis. We have a tradition of witnesses who have themselves encountered Jesus Christ and who knew what it was to offer him afresh to the society and the people of their time. And part of our task is to be able to offer the people of our time the richness and the fullness of the beauty of Catholic life that we all know. That's the beauty and blessing of the charisms and the saints of our tradition. That not everybody's path is the same path, even if it's to the same person. So some find him in the rosary and in pilgrimages, some in prayer groups, some in the work for the poor and evangelized, some in scripture study or lectio, some through the new movements and the new ecclesial communities. And part of the task for us is to be in touch with the richness of our co-witnesses, the co-witness of our tradition, so that we can have the confidence and inspiration to be able to reach out anew in our own day. You know, in his recent trip to the Philippines, Pope Francis' invitation to us was echoed in the words spoken at the end of the Mass by Cardinal Tagle, the Cardinal Archbishop of Manila, at the final Mass, which was before an estimated 7 million people. And the Cardinal said that the Filipinos want to follow Francis to the peripheries, to the shanties, to prison cells, to hospitals, to the world of politics, finance, art, sciences, culture, education, and social communications. And so I challenged myself and you to go out in this way. And let us never, never forget that the Lord accompanies us as we do this. And when we doubt, and when we're challenged, and when we're asked, why do you do this? Our response is always and quite simply, it is the Lord. It is the Lord. Thank you.